The Conjuring universe is once again trying to make The Nun a horror icon. But after the abysmal first outing, can The Nun 2 bring us the supernatural scares that the Conjureverse is known for? I'm Adam from Does It Hold Up, and this is our spoiler-free review of the newest horror movie to hit theaters this year, The Nun 2. The Demon Valak is back, this time haunting a boarding school in France while looking for an ancient artifact. So what does the church do? They call upon Sister Irene to face that evil force that she dealt with back in 2018's The Nun. The problem is, it's not a good decision, considering she needed a miracle to barely make it out alive the last time she went toe-to-toe with the Nun. And this time, she doesn't have a priest there to help her. She is on her own, and she is definitely ill-equipped to deal with this evil force. Ian Goldberg and Richard Nang, who co-wrote one of my favorite horror movies of the last decade, The Autopsy of Jane Doe, and Akilah Cooper, whose last two movies I really enjoyed, 2021's Malignant and 2023's Megan, worked together to write the script, so I had a lot of hope going into this movie. And let's just say I was wrong. I shouldn't have had as much hope as I did going into The Nun 2. The story is inconsistent at best. And although it does take up the tension and the scares, it fails to deliver something that is coherent and makes sense as a follow-up to 2018's The Nun. This story also deviates pretty far from what we expected The Nun to be back when it first appeared in The Conjuring 2. I feel like the original back in 2018 did this a lot better, gave us the character that we thought we knew we were going to get. This one kind of changes everything. I understand having to further a story and build upon everything that came before. But this takes such a hard leap in logic and takes too many turns that it almost becomes laughable at this point. But the saving grace is, there's one good thing about this story. It's the beginning of the movie. The first 15 minutes is actually excellent and delves into a really interesting idea that could change the horror genre and flip it on its head. Unfortunately, they don't continue it throughout the rest of the movie. And by the 20-minute mark, we're back to the same humdrum that audiences have come to know and I guess love over the last couple of decades. But the idea that a villain or a demon is possessing somebody and traveling across a continent basically as a serial killer, marking names off of a list, is a really interesting concept that I just wish they would have kept going with throughout the entire movie instead of getting bogged down in one location in one specific battle. Taissa Farmiga returns as Sister Irene, but she's definitely just going through the motions in this movie, going from one horrific set piece to the next horrific set piece. There's nothing new to her performance as this character, and to be honest, there's nothing new with this character as well. She's the same exact person we left at the end of the last movie, and she'll be the same exact person at the end of this movie as well. Not exactly something we want from our protagonist, as we usually like to see them grow and learn from the battles that they endure. That's not what happens here. But she is joined by a new face, Deborah, who is a girl that joins her convent that she's currently at, and comes with her on this adventure, even though Irene told her that she shouldn't. This character is played by Reid, who does a pretty good job, but she's pushed to the sideline a lot, and in fact, she's absolutely unnecessary to the overall story and anything that's happening in the movie. If this character didn't exist, the entire movie would play out exactly the same way, without any changes. If that doesn't scream unnecessary character, I'm not real sure what is. But one of the returning faces we do get to see in this movie is Jonas Bloquet, who comes back as Frenchie, or Maurice, as they're going to scream 1,000 times in this movie until you are just so sick of hearing it. His performance as the groundskeeper, though, is one of the best performances in the entire movie, and in fact, might be the best thing about this movie. He is a possessed person, and what he does with his body and the physical acting in this role is actually a little unnerving at times. He adds these slight modifications in his posture and his movements between when he's possessed and when he's playing himself. It's really unnerving and unsettling as the movie goes on. It's barely noticeable towards the beginning, but by the end of the movie, it's one of the creepiest things that could be happening on screen. The rest of the cast is rounded out by people that just could have been forgotten, and I don't think the audience really would have noticed. Anna Popplewell plays Kate, who's one of the teachers at the boarding school and who has an obvious crush on Maurice. Caitlin Rose Downey plays Sophie, whose entire character can be summed up in 3 things. 1, she's Kate's daughter. 2, she's awkward and sorta gets bullied at school. And 3, she has a very strange and nearly inappropriate relationship with Maurice. That's it. That's all there is to this character, and yet she's the focal point of a lot of what happens in this movie, when I'm not sure she should have been. I assume the writers added these characters because they wanted the audience to have somebody connect to, but unfortunately, that just didn't go to plan. The demon nun is played by Bonnie Aarons, who returns and does a wonderful job once again. The problem isn't so much with the acting as it is with the character itself in this movie. The nun feels like less of a threat and more of just a small nuisance until the very end of the movie, where she basically goes batshit crazy and turns all of the small scares and freakouts in the first part of the movie into a glorified CGI mess. It's not exactly what I want when I go to a nun movie. They did the same thing in 2018's The Nun, where the final battle was just this big, huge brawl for all, and it didn't work then. I'm not sure why they felt like repeating it in this movie was the best choice, because it clearly wasn't. The atmospheric tension in this movie is by far greater than anything that came in the 2018 version. In fact, this one works so much better because it has more to work with. Setting the location at a boarding school that is active was a brilliant idea because there's a lot of bodies constantly moving around, so it ratchets up the terror of something hiding behind every corner, ready to snatch an unsuspecting soul the minute they take a wrong turn. It gives you a really uneasy feeling whenever somebody's walking around alone. The slow pace of the movie also works really well in this one. It's ratcheting up the anticipation of whatever is to come next. It's like the slow rise on a roller coaster when you hear that click, 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 click of the car being pulled to the highest point. The problem is, imagine that roller coaster then only drops 10 feet and violently jerks you side to side for another 30 seconds before the ride ends. That's what it felt like watching this movie, as the small scares actually work really well for the first 2/3 of the movie, and the tension is there, edge of your seat watching it, until the third act hits, because once our heroine comes face to face with the demon late in the movie, all of the fear seems to be sucked from the story and everything just falls completely flat. So I went into this movie with all the hopes in the world, as I stated earlier. And it definitely was an improvement upon the extremely disappointing The Nun from 2018. But that's not really saying much, considering that movie set the bar extremely low. The scares were improved upon, the atmosphere was improved upon, the pacing was improved upon. And that makes a lot of sense, considering they hired Michael Chavez to come and direct this one, who's been slowly making a name for himself in the horror genre. He's definitely going to be a name to look out for moving forward, and I can't wait to see what he does next, because I'm hoping it's going to be a vast improvement upon this movie. Because at the end of the day, this movie just couldn't reach the heights of any other movie inside the Conjureverse, other than 2018's The Nun, which it was following up upon. It falls very short of even the worst of the Conjuring verse prior to this movie's release. I would prefer to watch The Curse of La Llorona, or even The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It, before returning to this movie. So overall, we're going to give The Nun 2 a C+, because this isn't going to be a breakout hit for the franchise, and it's going to be forgotten sooner rather than later. The fact that 2023 has been a pretty solid year for horror movies with the likes of Talk to Me, Megan, Evil Dead Rise, and The Boogeyman, it makes this movie feel like an even bigger failure of a horror movie that had so much potential that it could have been towards the top of horror movies when we get to the end of the year. This could have been one that we continued to talk about and how it got this entire franchise back on track, but sadly, it just couldn't live up to that hype. So if you're looking for something with decent scares that definitely come few and far between, and a balls to the wall insane third act, this movie might be for you. But if that doesn't sound interesting, you can probably sit this one out. Thanks for watching. Let us know in the comments below your thoughts on The Nun 2. Will you see it in theaters, or will you save your money to spend on one of the myriad of horror movies we're likely to get over the next 2 months? Don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel for more great content. And if you don't want to wait to watch something else, you can click the video on your screen right now to check out some of our other work. Until next time, remember that you're a legend, so be good to yourself, but more importantly, be kind to others. And as always, keep watching movies.